The silence that fell over the grand ballroom wasn't peaceful. It was terrifying. Minna stood frozen, her hands trembling as a dark crimson stain spread across the heiress's white silk gown, like a fresh wound. Isabella Thorne, the city's most ruthless socialite, held her empty glass out with a cruel smirk, savoring the moment she could destroy a life. She thought she was just crushing a clumsy waitress. She had no idea that the man walking through the double doors at that exact moment, the billionaire husband she terrified everyone with, was about to drop a bombshell that would silence the entire city. This isn't just a story about a stained dress. It is a story about the price of arrogance. The chandeliers of the Hotel Sovereign were so bright they hurt Minna Vance's eyes. It was the night of the annual Sterling Charity Gala, an event where a single ticket cost more than Minna earned in 3 years. Minna adjusted the collar of her stiff black uniform, wincing as the fabric rubbed against her neck. She had been on her feet for 10 hours. Her shoes were worn thin, sending sharp jolts of pain up her calves with every step, but she kept her posture perfect. She had to. One mistake, one complaint, and she would lose this job. And with her little brother's medical bills piling up on the kitchen counter at home, losing this job wasn't an option. "Table 4 needs more champagne. Now, Vance!" The sharp whisper came from Mr. Sterling, the floor manager. He was a man who sweated profusely and took it out on his staff. "Yes, sir," Minna said quietly, grabbing a heavy silver tray loaded with crystal flutes. She moved through the crowd like a ghost. That was the first rule of high-end service. Be invisible. Fill the glass, clear the plate, disappear. The guests didn't look at her. They looked through her. To them, she wasn't a 24-year-old woman with a degree in literature she couldn't afford to use. She was just a pair of hands holding a tray. The room was a sea of designer tuxedos and gowns that glittered like diamonds. But the atmosphere shifted the moment the double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. The chatter died down. Heads turned. Isabella Thorne had arrived. She descended the stairs like a queen claiming her throne. She wore a gown of pure white silk, custom-made in Paris, that hugged her figure and trailed behind her in a dramatic train. Diamonds dripped from her ears and throat, cold and sharp. Isabella wasn't just rich. She was old money, the kind of wealth that came with a belief that other people existed solely to serve her. But what made the room tense wasn't just her wealth. It was her reputation. Isabella was known in the social pages as the Ice Queen of New York. She had fired a personal assistant for bringing her coffee at the wrong temperature and had sued a dry cleaner into bankruptcy for a missing button. "She looks like she's ready to kill someone," a guest whispered near Minna. "She's waiting for her husband," another replied. "Julian Blackwood. Rumor has it he's flying in from Tokyo tonight, just for this." Minna froze for a microsecond at the name. Julian Blackwood, the tech mogul, the billionaire who had risen from nothing to own half the city's skyline. Minna knew the name, of course. Everyone did. But she also felt a strange, distant tug in her chest, a memory she quickly suppressed. It didn't matter. Men like Julian Blackwood didn't exist in the same universe as Minna Vance. Isabella reached the bottom of the stairs, her eyes scanning the room, not for friends, but for flaws. Her gaze landed on the nearest waiter, a young boy named Leo, who was trembling as he held a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Isabella walked up to him, plucked a crab cake from the tray, sniffed it, and dropped it back onto the pristine white napkin. "Stale," she said, her voice loud enough to carry. "Get this garbage out of my sight." Leo went pale, stammering an apology, but Isabella had already turned away. She snapped her fingers, the sound sharp as a whip crack. "Wine," she demanded, looking into the middle distance. Now. Minna was the closest. She took a deep breath, gripped her tray tighter, and stepped into the lion's den. Minna approached Isabella with the practiced grace of a veteran server. She had a bottle of the 1982 Bordeaux, the most expensive red on the menu, balanced perfectly on her tray alongside a fresh glass. "Good evening, Mrs. Blackwood," Minna said softly. She knew using the married name was what Isabella preferred, even though she usually went by her maiden name in the press. "Would you care for the Bordeaux?" Isabella turned slowly. Her eyes were an icy blue, devoid of any warmth. She looked Minna up and down, lingering on the scuffed shoes and the stray lock of brown hair that had escaped Minna's bun. "Finally," Isabella sneered. "I thought I'd die of thirst, waiting for the help to wake up." Minna didn't react. She uncorked the bottle with smooth, efficient movements. She began to pour. The dark red liquid swirled into the crystal goblet. "Stop!" Isabella commanded when the glass was half full. Minna stopped immediately, twisting the bottle to catch the last drop so it wouldn't stain the tablecloth. It was a perfect pour. She placed the glass on a small cocktail napkin and held the tray out to offer it. Isabella reached for the glass. Her fingers brushed against Minna's hand, cold, clammy skin against Minna's warm, working hands. Then, it happened. As Isabella's fingers closed around the stem, she didn't pull the glass toward her. Instead, she flicked her wrist outward. It was subtle, a movement so quick that, to an untrained eye, it looked like an accident. But Minna saw the flash of malice in Isabella's eyes. Isabella slapped the glass out of Minna's hand. Crash! The sound of shattering crystal cut through the murmuring crowd like a gunshot. Time seemed to slow down. The expensive Bordeaux exploded outward. But because of the angle of Isabella's slap, the wine didn't hit Minna. It splashed in a violent, dark arc straight onto the front of Isabella's pristine, white silk gown. The ballroom went deathly silent. The orchestra stopped playing. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The red stain bloomed across Isabella's stomach and thighs, looking horrific against the white fabric. It looked like a crime scene. Isabella looked down at her dress, her mouth falling open in theatrical shock. Then, her head snapped up, her eyes locking onto Minna with pure, unadulterated hatred. You clumsy, stupid little cow," Isabella shrieked. Her voice cracked, echoing off the high ceilings. Mrs. Blackwood, I didn't—" Minna stammered, stepping back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You knocked it." "Are you accusing me?" Isabella screamed, stepping forward. She didn't care about the scene she was making. She thrived on it. "You threw this on me. Everyone saw it. You're jealous, aren't you? You saw a woman worth more than your entire lineage, and you decided to ruin me." "No, please," Minna said, her hands shaking. "I can get some club soda. We can—" "Don't you dare touch me!" Isabella swatted Minna's hand away. Mr. Sterling, the manager, came running, his face pale with terror. Mrs. Blackwood, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. This incompetence happened." Isabella pointed a manicured finger at Minna. "Look at this dress. It's ruined. Do you know how much this cost? $20,000. That's more than this girl makes in a decade." Minna felt the tears pricking her eyes, hot and stinging. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing her chest. Hundreds of eyes were staring at her, pitying, judging, laughing. "I want her fired," Isabella hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that was somehow louder than her scream. "I want her fired, and I want her sued for the cost of the dress. Right now. Throw her out." "Of course, immediately," Mr. Sterling said, turning on Minna. "Vance, grab your things. You're done." "Mr. Sterling, please," Minna pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. She hit the glass. I didn't drop it. Get out, Sterling barked. Isabella smiled. It was a small, victorious smile. She had won. She had crushed the insect. Wait! The voice came from the entrance. It wasn't loud, but it possessed a natural authority that instantly silenced the room. It was a deep, baritone voice that commanded absolute attention. Isabella's smile faltered. She knew that voice. The crowd parted. Walking through the center of the ballroom was a man in a black tuxedo that fit him like armor. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair, swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently burning with a quiet intensity. It was Julian Blackwood. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at the stained dress. He didn't look at the trembling manager. His eyes were locked on Minna. And for the first time that night, the invisible waitress looked back. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Julian?" she whispered. Isabella's head snapped toward her husband. "Darling, look what this incompetent trash did to me. She ruined the night. Tell security to throw her in the street." Julian Blackwood ignored his wife completely. He walked past the guests, past the manager, past the shattered glass, until he was standing directly in front of Minna. The room held its breath. Everyone expected him to yell. Everyone expected the billionaire to defend his wife. Instead, Julian reached out. With a gentleness that shocked everyone watching, he took Minna's trembling hand in his. "Minna?" he asked, his voice thick with an emotion the crowd couldn't place. "Is it really you?" Minna looked up at the man she hadn't seen in 6 years, the man who wasn't a billionaire when she knew him. "I didn't do it, Julian. I swear." Julian turned slowly to face Isabella. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by a cold fury that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. "I saw everything from the balcony," Julian said, his voice flat and deadly. "I saw you slap the glass, Isabella." Isabella's face went white. "Julian, she provoked me." "Be quiet," Julian said softly. He turned back to the manager, Mr. Sterling, who was shaking like a leaf. "You just fired her?" Well, Mrs. Blackwood insisted," Sterling stammered. "Good," Julian said, "because she doesn't work for you anymore." He turned back to Minna, raising her hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles that were red from scrubbing dishes. "She's coming with me." The silence in the ballroom was brittle, threatening to shatter at any moment. Julian Blackwood stood like a monolith, his hand firmly clasping Minna's. The warmth of his palm was the only thing grounding her. Otherwise, she felt as if she might float away or faint from the sheer adrenaline coursing through her veins. Isabella Thorne stood frozen, her chest heaving beneath the wine-stained silk. Her face was a kaleidoscope of emotions, shock, then humiliation, and finally, a twisting, ugly rage. She had been the queen of this city for 5 years. No one defied her. Certainly not her husband, who was usually too busy conquering the tech world to care about social squabbles. "Julian," Isabella said, her voice trembling, not with sorrow, but with the effort to control her volume. "You are making a scene. Let go of that servant. People are watching." "Let them watch," Julian replied, his voice calm and carrying effortlessly across the room. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at her. "Maybe they'll finally see you for what you are, Isabella. I've tolerated your vanity. I've tolerated your spending, but I will not tolerate cruelty." "Cruelty?" Isabella laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound. "She ruined my dress. It's an accident. Why are you siding with the help over your wife?" "Because I know Minna," Julian said. The way he said her name, familiar, heavy with history, sent a fresh ripple of whispers through the crowd. "And I know she wouldn't spill a drop unless she was pushed. Literally. Mr. Sterling, the manager who had just fired Minna, stepped forward, wringing his hands. He smelled the shift in power and was desperate to realign himself. "Mr. Blackwood, sir," Sterling oozed, forcing a smile. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. If the girl, Miss Vance, is an acquaintance of yours, we can certainly overlook the breakage. I can rescind the termination." Julian finally turned his eyes to Sterling. It was like a wolf looking at a rabbit. "You fired her without asking a single question," Julian said coldly. "You humiliated her in front of 300 people to appease a temper tantrum. You don't get to rescind anything." Julian reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out a sleek black card, his personal business card, and flicked it onto the silver tray Sterling was holding. "Contact my office tomorrow," Julian said. "We'll be discussing the lease agreement for this hotel. I own the building, Sterling, and I don't like how my tenants treat people." Sterling's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the edge of a table to steady himself as the blood drained from his face. "Come on," Julian whispered to Minna, tugging gently on her hand. "Let's get out of here." I can't just leave," Minna whispered back, panic rising in her throat. "My uniform. My bag is in the locker room. I have to punch out." Julian stopped it. He looked down at her, his dark eyes softening in a way that made Minna's heart ache. He reached up and unbuttoned his tuxedo jacket. In one smooth motion, he slid it off his shoulders and draped it over Minna. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of sandalwood and expensive scotch. It swallowed her small frame, covering the cheap, scratchy uniform and the stain of servitude. "You don't need to punch out, Minna," he said firmly. "You're done." He guided her toward the grand exit. The crowd, the elite of New York society, parted like the Red Sea. They stared at Minna, the waitress they had ignored 5 minutes ago, with hungry curiosity. Who was she? Why did the city's most eligible billionaire look at her like she was the only person in the room? Isabella watched them go. She didn't chase them. She knew that running after him in her stained dress would only make her look more pathetic. Instead, she stood alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by shattered glass and the ruins of her reputation. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms until they drew blood. "This isn't over," she whispered to herself, her eyes burning with a promise of vengeance. "You think you found a savior, little waitress? You just painted a target on your back." As they reached the heavy brass doors of the hotel, the cool night air hit Minna's face. A line of black SUVs and limousines idled at the curb. A valet rushed forward, opening the back door of a Rolls-Royce Phantom. "Julian, wait," Minna said, stopping on the sidewalk. She pulled her hand away from his. "I can't get in that car with you." Julian turned, his expression pained. "Minna, please. You're shivering. You have nowhere to go right now. Just let me take you. Somewhere safe. We need to talk." "I have to go home," she said, her voice breaking. "Toby is waiting for me. I'm late for his medication." Julian stiffened. "Toby? Who is Toby?" A flash of jealousy passed through his eyes, rapid and intense. "Is he your husband?" Minna let out a short, bitter laugh. "No, he's my brother. He's 10 years old, Julian, and he's sick. That's why I was working this job. That's why I took the abuse." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading. "I lost my paycheck tonight because of you. I know you were trying to help, but I needed that money." Julian looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 6 years. He saw the fatigue under her eyes, the thinness of her wrists. He realized with a jolt of horror that the woman he had loved, the brilliant, spirited literature student, had been surviving, not living. "Get in the car, Minna," Julian said, his voice leaving no room for argument, but filled with a profound sadness. "I'll take you to your brother, and I promise you, you will never have to worry about a paycheck ever again." Minna hesitated. She looked at the subway entrance down the block, a long, cold ride, home to a drafty apartment in Queens. Then she looked at the open door of the Rolls-Royce. She thought of Toby, waiting for his meds. She ducked her head and climbed into the car. The interior of the Rolls-Royce was quieter than a library. The windows were tinted, shutting out the flashing lights of the city. It felt like a spaceship, isolated from the rest of the world. Minna sat on the edge of the leather seat, clutching the lapels of Julian's tuxedo jacket. Julian sat opposite her, his long legs stretched out, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Address?" he asked the driver through the intercom. 34th Street, Queens, near the overpass," Minna supplied quietly. Julian frowned. He knew the area. It was industrial, run down and dangerous at night. "You live there?" "It's what we can afford," she said defensively. The car glided into traffic. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick with unspoken questions and old wounds. "Why did you leave?" The question hung in the air, soft but heavy. Julian hadn't raised his voice, but the pain behind the words was palpable. Minna looked out the window at the blurring city lights. "You know why, Julian?" "No," he said, leaning forward. "I don't. I woke up one morning, 6 years ago, and you were gone. No note, no call. You changed your number. You dropped out of Columbia. I spent 2 years looking for you, Minna. I hired private investigators. I checked every hospital and morgue in the tri-state area. It was like you vanished off the face of the earth." "I had to," she whispered. "Why?" His voice cracked. "We were happy. We had nothing. But we were happy. Remember apartment 4B? Remember eating instant noodles on the floor because we couldn't afford a table? You told me you believed in me. You told me my code would change the world, and the second I got my first funding offer, you disappeared." Flashbacks hit Minna like physical blows. 6 years ago, she was 22. Julian was 24. They were poor, hungry, and madly in love. He was a genius coder working on an algorithm that nobody understood, and she was a student working 2 jobs to pay their rent. She remembered the nights he would fall asleep on his keyboard, and she would drape a blanket over him, kissing his temple. She remembered the day the letter came. "It wasn't about the money, Julian," Minna said, turning to face him, tears streaming down her face. "It was never about the money." "Then what?" Julian demanded. "Was it another man?" "No," Minna cried. "There has never been anyone else. It was your mother." Julian recoiled as if she had slapped him. "My mother? My mother died 10 years ago." Minna shook her head slowly. "Not your biological mother, the woman who adopted you, Mrs. Thorne." Julian went still. "Isabella's mother?" "Yes," Minna said, her voice trembling. "The day before you got your funding, she came to the apartment while you were out pitching to investors. She told me that I was a distraction. She said that if I stayed with you, the investors would pull out. She said I was low-class baggage that would hold you back from your potential." Julian's face darkened, a storm brewing in his eyes. "And you believed her?" "She had proof, Julian. She showed me documents, contracts. She said the investors wanted a clean slate, a young, single genius, not a guy tied down to a waitress with a sick family." Minna took a shuddering breath. "My parents had just died in the car crash. Toby was 4. I was drowning in debt. Mrs. Thorne, she offered me a deal. She would pay off my parents' funeral costs and give me enough to set Toby up in a special care facility, if I left." If I disappeared and never contacted you again. Minna sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I did it for you, and I did it for Toby. I thought if I left, you would succeed. And look at you. You own the city. I was right. There was a long, agonizing silence. Minna waited for him to yell, to tell her she was stupid, to tell her she should have trusted him. Instead, she felt him move. He slid across the leather seat and sat next to her. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into his chest. You foolish, noble girl, he whispered into her hair. His voice was thick with tears. My investors never said that. Mrs. Thorne, she lied to you. She wanted me to marry Isabella. She was setting it up from the beginning. Minna pulled back, shock widening her eyes. What? Isabella's family was losing money, Julian explained, his jaw tight. They had the name, but they were cash poor. They saw my algorithm. They knew I was going to be a billionaire. Mrs. Thorne wanted to secure her daughter's future. She got rid of you so she could push Isabella on me during my most vulnerable time, when I was heartbroken and thinking you had abandoned me. The realization washed over Minna. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They had been manipulated, used. I married her, Julian said, his voice filled with self-loathing. 3 years later. I didn't love her. I was numb. I thought you didn't love me, so I just gave up on happiness. I focused on the business. The marriage was a merger, nothing more, and she has made my life miserable every day since. The car began to slow down. They had arrived at the crumbling apartment complex in Queens. Julian looked out the window at the grim surroundings, the graffiti, the barred windows. Then he looked back at Minna. You've been living like this? He asked softly. While I've been living in penthouses? I'm okay. Minna wiped her eyes. I have Toby. That's all that matters. No, Julian said. He grabbed her hand again, tighter this time. It's not okay. And it ends tonight. Julian, I can't just... I'm coming up, he said. I want to meet Toby. And then you're packing your bags. What? No, Julian. You have a wife. You can't just... My wife. Julian cut her off, his eyes hard as diamonds. Just declared war on the only woman I have ever loved. I'm not going back to her, Minna. Tonight, I'm getting my family back. Before Minna could argue, the driver opened the door. Julian stepped out onto the cracked pavement of Queens, a billionaire in a tuxedo, looking like a prince who had finally found his lost princess. But Minna knew something he didn't. Isabella Thorne wasn't just a cruel socialite. She was dangerous. And when she found out Julian was here, she wouldn't just spill wine. She would spill blood. As they walked toward the building entrance, a black sedan with tinted windows parked across the street slowly rolled down its window. A camera lens poked out, the shutter clicking silently in the darkness. The fourth-floor walk-up was a brutal contrast to the Hotel Sovereign. There was no red carpet, only peeling linoleum that curled at the edges. The air didn't smell of expensive perfume and champagne. It smelled of boiled cabbage and damp plaster. Julian Blackwood, a man who could buy this entire city block without checking his bank balance, walked up the narrow, creaking stairs without a word of complaint. He held Minna's hand as if it were a lifeline. When Minna unlocked the door to apartment 4B, the reality of her life hit Julian like a physical blow. The main room was tiny. A mattress was pushed into the corner, separated from the living area by a hanging sheet. Piles of medical paperwork covered the small, wobbly kitchen table. Minna? A small, weak voice called out from the bedroom. Minna dropped Julian's hand and rushed to the back room. I'm here, Toby. I'm here. Julian followed slowly, stopping in the doorway. Toby looked small for 10 years old. He was pale, his skin almost translucent under the harsh light of the single bulb. An oxygen tank sat next to his bed, the plastic tubing coiling like a snake. He was clutching a worn-out comic book. "You're late," Toby wheezed, trying to smile. "Did you bring the magic potion?" "I did," Minna said, her voice trembling as she grabbed a pill bottle from the nightstand. She helped him sit up and swallow the medicine with a glass of water. Toby's eyes drifted past his sister and landed on the tall, dark figure in the doorway. His eyes went wide. "Who's that?" Toby whispered. "Is he a doctor?" Minna looked back at Julian. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "No, sweetie. He's an old friend. His name is Julian." Julian stepped into the room. The space was so small, his shoulders almost brushed the doorframe. He knelt down beside the bed, bringing himself to Toby's eye level. He saw the intelligence in the boy's eyes, the same spark Minna had. "Hey, Toby," Julian said softly. "I'm not a doctor, but I fix things. I'm an engineer." Toby's eyes lit up. "Like computers?" "Exactly like computers," Julian smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his stern face. "I hear you like comic books. Who's your favorite? Iron Man?" "Yeah," Toby breathed, "because he built his own heart." Julian felt a lump form in his throat. He looked at Minna, who was biting her lip to keep from sobbing. He stood up and gently touched Minna's arm, guiding her back into the kitchen. "What is it?" Julian asked, his voice low and urgent. "What does he have?" "Cystic fibrosis," Minna whispered, leaning against the counter for support. "And a heart defect. He needs a double transplant, Julian. But the waiting list is miles long, and without the specialized treatment, the doctors say his lungs are giving up. The insurance from my waitressing job barely covers the oxygen." Julian closed his eyes. He thought about the $20,000 dress Isabella had worn tonight. He thought about the millions of dollars he had donated to museums and operas just to keep up appearances in society. "He needs the surgery," Julian said. "It costs $300,000 just to get on the private list," Minna said, her voice defeating. "I have $42 in my bank account." Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. It was 1 Corem, but the person on the other end answered on the first ring. "Blackwood?" the voice on the phone said. It was Marcus Stone, Julian's personal attorney and only real friend. "Marcus," Julian said, his voice steel, "I need you to transfer $5 million into a new trust fund immediately. Beneficiary, Toby Vance." Minna audibly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Julian, no." Julian ignored her. "And Marcus, get the best pulmonary specialist in the country on the phone. Wake them up. I don't care if they're in Switzerland. I want a consult by morning. And one more thing." Julian paused, his eyes hardening as he looked out the window at the city skyline. "Draft the divorce papers. I'm done." "Julian," Marcus's voice was cautious. "You know the prenup is tricky. The board members. Isabella's family has shares. This will be a war. I don't care if I lose the company, Marcus. I don't care if I lose every penny. Just get me out." Julian hung up the phone. He turned to Minna. "You are not alone anymore," he said fiercely. "Toby is going to get that heart. He is going to get those lungs. And you are never going to wear a uniform again." Minna collapsed into his arms, the years of stress and fear finally breaking. They stood there in the tiny kitchen, holding each other as the city slept around them. But the city wasn't sleeping. 5 miles away, in the penthouse of the Blackwood Tower, Isabella Thorne was pacing back and forth on a Persian rug. She was still wearing the wine-stained dress. She held a glass of scotch in one hand and her phone in the other. On the screen was a grainy photo sent by the private investigator. It showed Julian and Minna entering the run-down apartment building in Queens. "He went inside," Isabella whispered to the empty room. "He actually went inside that rat hole." She threw the glass against the wall. It shattered, amber liquid dripping down the expensive wallpaper. "You want to play the hero, Julian?" she hissed. "You want to save the damsel? Fine. Let's see how you save her when she's behind bars." She picked up her phone and dialed a contact saved as Detective Miller, Precinct 14. "Detective," Isabella said, her voice transforming instantly into a tearful, panicked tremolo. "I need to report a theft, a grand larceny. Yes, it was the waitress. She stole my diamond necklace right off my neck during the gala. I just realized it was gone, and I know exactly where she lives." The sun rose over Queens, casting a hazy orange light through the barred window of Minna's apartment. For the first time in years, Minna had slept peacefully. She was curled up on the small sofa, wrapped in Julian's tuxedo jacket. Julian was asleep in the wooden chair next to her, his head resting on his arms on the kitchen table. It was a domestic scene of perfect peace. Then, the world exploded. Bam! 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 The door shook violently on its hinges. "Police! Open up!" Minna jolted awake, screaming. Julian was on his feet instantly, his instincts kicking in. "Stay back!" Julian ordered Minna. He moved toward the door. "Who is it?" "NYPD! Open the door or we kick it down!" Julian unlocked the deadbolt and swung the door open. 3 uniformed officers and a man in a plain suit barged in, filling the tiny room. Their hands were on their holsters. "What is the meaning of this?" Julian demanded, his voice dropping into his CEO command tone. "Do you know who I am?" The man in the suit, Detective Miller, chewed on a toothpick and smirked. "I know who you are, Mr. Blackwood, but this isn't about you. We're here for her." He pointed a thick finger at Minna, who was backing away, trembling. "Minna Vance," Miller said. "You are under arrest." "Arrest?" Minna cried. "For what?" "Grand larceny," Miller said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "We have a sworn statement from Mrs. Isabella Blackwood. She claims you assaulted her and stole a diamond necklace worth $250,000. "That's a lie!" Julian roared, stepping between the detective and Minna. "I was there. She didn't steal anything. This is a setup." "If it's a lie, you won't mind if we search the premises," Miller said coolly. He signaled to the other officers. "Toss the place." "You can't do that!" Minna screamed as an officer began ripping the cushions off the sofa. "My brother is sick in the other room. Please don't wake him." "Search the bag," Miller ordered, pointing to Minna's worn-out backpack sitting by the door, the one she had brought home from the hotel. One of the officers grabbed the bag. He upended it onto the kitchen table. Her apron, her comfortable shoes, and a few loose coins spilled out. And then, with a heavy clunk, a shimmering object hit the table. The room went silent. There, amidst the lint and loose change, lay the star of midnight, a heavy platinum necklace encrusted with sapphires and diamonds. It sparkled cruelly in the morning light. Minna stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. I've never seen that before, I swear. She must have slipped it in when she bumped into me." "Save it for the judge, sweetheart," Miller said. He grabbed Minna's wrist and spun her around, snapping the cold metal cuffs onto her wrists. "Julian!" Minna screamed, panic taking over. "Julian, please!" Toby appeared in the bedroom doorway, clutching his oxygen mask. "Minna! What are they doing to Minna?" He started to cough, a racking, wet sound that shook his small body. "Toby!" Minna struggled against the officer. "Don't touch him! He needs his medicine!" Julian grabbed Detective Miller by the lapels of his cheap suit. "Listen to me," Julian snarled, his face inches from the detective's. "This is a plant. My wife put that there. If you take her, you are killing that boy in the other room. Do you understand me?" Miller shoved Julian back. "Touch me again, Mr. Blackwood, and you'll go downtown, too. I have evidence. The necklace is here. The girl is going." Miller turned to the other officers. "Call Child Protective Services. The guardian is being incarcerated. The kid needs to go into the system." "No!" Minna shrieked, fighting like a wild animal now. "Not the system. He won't survive the system. Julian, don't let them take him." Julian looked at the chaos unraveling in front of him. He saw the terror in Toby's eyes. He saw the despair in Minna's face. He realized that his money, his power, his influence, none of it worked fast enough to stop this immediate violence. Isabella had outplayed him. She knew the law was a blunt instrument, and she had wielded it perfectly. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to be calm. He needed to be surgical. "Detective," Julian said, raising his hands. "Take her. Process her." Minna looked at him, betrayed. "Julian?" Julian locked eyes with her. "Trust me. Go with them. Don't resist." He turned to the officer, reaching for Toby. "But the boy stays with me." "Sir, you're not the legal guardian," the officer said. "No," Julian said, pulling out his wallet and flashing his ID. "But I am the owner of the building you are standing in. I bought it this morning at 4:00 a.m. online. This is my tenant, and I am temporarily assuming custody until my lawyers arrive in 20 minutes. If you try to move a critically ill child without a medical transport, I will sue the NYPD for wrongful death before you even get down the stairs." The officers hesitated. They looked at Miller. Miller grunted. He had the necklace. He had the girl. He didn't need the bad press of a dead kid. "Fine," Miller spat. "Leave the kid. Let's go." They dragged Minna out the door. She looked back over her shoulder, tears streaming down her face. "Take care of him," she sobbed. "Promise me." "I promise," Julian shouted after her. The door slammed shut. Julian was left alone in the wrecked apartment with a terrified, coughing 10-year-old boy. The silence was deafening. Julian walked over to Toby, who was shaking uncontrollably. He sat on the edge of the bed and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Is Minna coming back?" Toby asked, his voice small. "Yes," Julian said, his voice trembling with a dark, terrifying rage he had never felt before. "She is coming back, and the person who did this is going to pay. Not with money, but with everything." Julian picked up his phone. He didn't call his lawyer this time. He called the number of a man he hadn't spoken to in years, a journalist at the New York Times who specialized in exposing corruption. "Hello?" the voice answered. "It's Julian Blackwood," he said. "I have a story for you. It's about Isabella Thorne. It's about a framed waitress, and I have audio." Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, sleek device, a voice recorder pen. He had activated it the moment the police kicked down the door. He had recorded everything, the setup, the lack of due process. But that wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed to prove Isabella planted it. "I'm going to war," Julian whispered to the empty room. The media called it the Cinderella trial, but there was nothing fairy tale about the atmosphere inside the Manhattan Criminal Court 3 days later. The air was thick with tension, smelling of floor wax and expensive cologne. Because Julian Blackwood had pulled every string in the city, the arraignment had been bypassed for an immediate emergency hearing regarding the evidence. He had wagered his entire reputation on this single morning. Minna sat at the defendant's table, wearing a simple grey suit Julian had sent to her holding cell. She looked pale, dark circles bruising the skin under her eyes, but her chin was held high. She looked over her shoulder and saw Julian sitting in the front row. He nodded at her, a microscopic movement that said, "Hold on." On the other side of the aisle sat Isabella Thorne. She was dressed in mourning black, a vintage Chanel suit that made her look fragile and sympathetic. She dabbled at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. The press ate it up. The flashes of cameras outside had been blinding. "The prosecution calls Isabella Thorne Blackwood to the stand," the district attorney announced. Isabella walked to the stand, her heels clicking a rhythm of arrogance. She took the oath, her voice wavering perfectly. "Mrs. Blackwood," the DA began, holding up a plastic evidence bag containing the shimmering Star of Midnight necklace. "Is this the item that was stolen from you?" "Yes," Isabella sniffed. "My grandmother left it to me. It's worth $250,000. But the sentimental value, it's priceless. And how did the defendant take it?" Isabella pointed a trembling finger at Minna. "She was the waitress. She spilled wine on me, purposely, I realize now, to create a distraction. In the chaos, she unclasped it from my neck. I didn't notice until later, when the police found it in her bag. I was heartbroken that someone I tried to employ would do this." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the jury. Minna gripped the table edge until her knuckles turned white. It was a perfect lie. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood," the DA said, looking satisfied. "Your witness?" Julian's lawyer, Marcus Stone, stood up. But before he could speak, the courtroom doors opened. "Actually, Your Honor," Marcus said, "the defense calls a surprise witness regarding the authenticity of the evidence. We call Julian Blackwood." A collective gasp swept through the room. Husbands testifying against wives was rare. Billionaires testifying in petty theft cases was unheard of. Isabella's eyes widened. She hadn't expected this. She thought Julian was just there to support his mistress. Julian took the stand. He didn't look at the jury. He looked directly at Isabella. His expression was unreadable, which was the most terrifying thing about him. "Mr. Blackwood," Marcus said, pacing the floor, "you are familiar with the Star of Midnight necklace?" "Intimately," Julian replied, his voice deep and steady. "I insured it." "And looking at the necklace in this evidence bag, the one found in Minna Vance's backpack, can you confirm it is the genuine article?" Julian leaned forward. He didn't even need to pick up the bag. "No," Julian said clearly. "That necklace is a fake." Isabella stood up, forgetting her fragile act. "Objection! He's lying to protect her." "Sit down, Mrs. Blackwood," the judge barked. "It's a paste replica," Julian continued, his voice rising over the commotion. "High-quality zirconium on a silver-plated chain, worth about $50 on Canal Street." "And how do you know this, Mr. Blackwood?" Marcus asked. Julian reached into his suit pocket. He pulled out a black velvet box. He opened it, and the courtroom lights caught the fire of the real diamonds. They blazed with a brilliance that made the necklace in the evidence bag look like dull glass. "Because," Julian said, holding the real necklace up for the jury, "I bought the real necklace back from a pawn shop in Macau 3 months ago." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Isabella's face drained of blood, turning a sickly shade of grey. "My wife," Julian said, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen, "has a gambling problem. She lost $2 million in Monte Carlo last spring. She sold her grandmother's necklace to cover the debt. I found out, bought it back to save the family embarrassment, and kept it in my private safe. She didn't know I had it." Julian turned to look at Isabella, who was now trembling for real. "She commissioned a fake," Julian told the jury. "She has been wearing the fake for months, and that is the fake she planted in Minna Vance's bag. She framed an innocent woman for stealing a piece of jewelry that she herself had already sold on the black market." "That's not true!" Isabella shrieked, her composure shattering completely. "He's making it up. He's insane." "I have the receipts from the pawn shop," Julian said, handing a folder to the bailiff. "And I have the credit card statement showing a payment to Quick Fix Jewelers for a replica, signed by Isabella Thorne." The judge looked at the documents. He looked at the real necklace. He looked at the fake one. Then Julian delivered the final blow. "And, Your Honor, regarding the timeline of the alleged theft," Julian tapped the table, "I have a recording." He played the audio from the pen recorder he had used in the apartment. The court heard Detective Miller's voice, and then Julian's warning about the setup. But then Julian played a voicemail he had intercepted, a voicemail Isabella had left for her friend during the gala, 10 minutes after the wine spill. "I'm going to destroy her. Verify. I slipped the fake into her bag when she was cleaning the table. The police are on their way. By tomorrow, I'll be the victim, and she'll be in jail. And Julian will come crawling back." The recording ended. Isabella sank back into her chair, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. There was no way out. The Ice Queen had melted into a puddle of fraud and malice. The judge slammed his gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot ending the war. "Case dismissed with prejudice," the judge roared, glaring at the prosecution table. "Miss Vance, you are free to go immediately. Bailiff, take Mrs. Blackwood into custody for perjury, filing a false police report, and insurance fraud. And someone get the district attorney on the phone. I want a word about Detective Miller." Pandemonium erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs popped. But amidst the chaos, only 2 people mattered. Minna stood up, her legs shaking. Julian stepped down from the witness stand and walked toward her. He didn't care about the cameras. He didn't care about the scandal. He opened the gate and pulled her into a hug so tight it knocked the breath out of her. "I told you," he whispered into her ear, his voice rough with relief. "I told you I'd fix it." Minna buried her face in his chest, sobbing. Not tears of fear, but tears of freedom. 6 months later, the garden of the Hamptons estate was in full bloom, the hydrangeas bursting with blue and violet. It was a far cry from the cramped apartment in Queens. Toby sat on the grass, laughing as he threw a tennis ball for a golden retriever puppy. His cheeks were rosy, his breathing deep and clear. The transplant had been a success, and thanks to the best doctors money could buy, he was running for the first time in his life. On the patio, Minna sat with a book in her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was watching her brother. She wore a soft yellow sundress, her hair loose and shining in the sun. The shadows under her eyes were gone, replaced by a glow of contentment. Julian walked out of the house, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. He had traded his stiff tuxedos for a casual linen shirt. He looked younger, the weight of the world lifted from his shoulders. "The lawyer's called," Julian said, handing her a glass and sitting beside her. "Is it done?" Minna asked. "It's done," Julian nodded. "The divorce is final. Isabella was sentenced this morning. 3 years in minimum security, plus community service. She'll be picking up trash along the highway wearing an orange vest. I thought that was a nice touch of irony." Minna smiled, but there was no malice in it. She was too happy to hold on to hate. "And the company?" "I stepped down as CEO," Julian shrugged. "I'm staying on as chairman. I realized I missed the engineering. I want to build things again, starting with that treehouse Toby asked for." He reached out and took Minna's hand, the ring on her finger, a simple, elegant diamond, not the gaudy rock Isabella had worn, caught the light. "You saved us, Julian," Minna whispered. "No," Julian said, bringing her hand to his lips. "You saved me. I was a prisoner in a golden cage until you spilled that wine." Minna laughed, the sound ringing out across the garden, joining the sound of her brother's laughter. technically, she spilled it. Best mistake she ever made, Julian smiled. He leaned in and kissed her, a long, slow kiss that tasted of lemonade and a future that was finally, completely theirs. The invisible waitress was seen, the cruel heiress was dethroned, and the boy who couldn't breathe was running in the wind. It was, finally, a perfect pour. This story proves that while money can buy power, it cannot buy the truth. Isabella thought her wealth made her untouchable, but she forgot that arrogance is the architect of its own destruction. Julian and Minna showed us that true loyalty and love are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. What did you think of Isabella's downfall? Did she get the punishment she deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with a friend who needs a little drama in their life today. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.